This program is made possible by Atlantic Richfield Company. Energy, chemicals, minerals.
Do you, Mortimer Adler, who've lived all of your life in the life of the mind, do you need beauty?
Oh, definitely. A life without beauty would be a life not enriched at all.
In what way does beauty contribute to happiness?
I think, first of all, pleasure. Pleasure is one of the great goods, a real good, satisfying a natural need. As Aristotle said, man cannot live without pleasure, and if he's deprived of the higher pleasures, the pleasures of the enjoyment of beauty, he will resort to lower pleasures, and his life will not be as good a life.
Mortimer Adler has what someone called a wonderful talent of packing thought close and rendering it portable. His latest book is called 6 Great Ideas, the theme of this series. Mortimer Adler believes we're all philosophers at heart and could be in our daily lives as well if we pay attention to the great ideas. One idea is beauty. High in these Colorado Rockies sits the Aspen Institute, where Mortimer Adler will lead his discussion of beauty in a setting perfect for the subject. The Aspen Institute brings together people from various walks of life to talk about ideas we usually take for granted or ignore altogether in the busy course of living. Mortimer Adler is as familiar here as the mountains around him. Compiler of the 54-volume Great Books of the Western World, editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Britannica, author and editor of a score of books, he was a prime and original enthusiast for the Aspen idea of adult education, the idea that we don't stop growing when we finish growing up. His own seminar this summer is a marathon of moral philosophy. The participants come from business, law, labor, government, science, education, and the arts. This week, they all have in common the challenge of Adler's book on the 6 great ideas.
Try to call us. Morning, said the best for Margaret.
I said, oh, he's unhappy. He's unhappy.
You're right. I know. His place, you know. I know that word, I know.
And when he raises his hand, you better watch out. So I'm sitting across the room, so I just look over and see what the East is thinking.
Yes.
Now, I expect all of you aesthetic characters. And this one, look at his hair.
With such diverse experiences, they naturally have their own opinions about those ideas. But they've read his book and will begin with the thoughts of Mortimer Adler. That's where we begin, too, to consider what he says is common to a Beethoven sonata, a sunburst of Italian fireworks, a Rembrandt masterpiece, and a triple play in the last inning of the World Series. To Mortimer Adler, the name of the game is beauty. Take this garden. What do you find beautiful about it?
Well, it's beautifully laid out. Its proportions are magnificent. There are these magnificent things in it, like that Mexican fountain, the trees, and the vista.
Kind of harmony,
proportion, and there's a kind of clarity about it. I mean, you stand here and look at it, it holds your eyes. You don't turn away, you don't look down at the grass, you look at it.
Is beauty a matter of taste?
Yes. The appreciated beauty is a matter of taste.
Who determines the taste?
I don't think I can answer that question. The question is whether or not one man's taste is superior to another. That depends upon the character of the objects they appreciate.
Well, let's say that a man walks down the street, turns the corner and says, there's a beautiful woman. Is that just a matter of taste?
Well, first place, I have to ask another question before I'd even be willing to admit that he was right in using the word beautiful. If, in saying that, he was really meaning, there's a sexually attractive woman, if that's what he meant by beautiful, then he shouldn't use the word beautiful. Because I think one of the most important remarks ever made on this whole subject was made by Immanuel Kant, who, agreeing with Aquinas that the beholding of beautiful things gave us a pleasure, makes the further point that pleasure must be absolutely disinterested. Disinterested. Now, if the man's interested in this woman sexually as an object of love, then his calling her beautiful is, I think, not devoid of of interest, and therefore he's not really appreciating the beauty as such.
What about when you move to another area of beauty? Can you say that a woman is beautiful in the same way that that fountain is beautiful?
Yes, if, when you behold it, all I can say is that if looking at that fountain, you are glued to it in a way, and enthralled by the change of color, the rainbow that's there, and the different motion of the water as it goes up and down, then it is beautiful in its way, as a perfectly formed female face or a perfectly formed male body is beautiful.
So that fountain is beautiful whether or not anyone is looking at it.
Oh, absolutely. No. It has admirable beauty. It's admirable whether anyone admires it or not, but it's not enjoyable till someone enjoys it.
So there are two kinds of beauty.
That's right. Admirable beauty and enjoyable beauty.
Enjoyable beauty is
Dependent upon the act of enjoyment on the part of the person. That is, the thing is admirable in itself, but it's enjoyable by you or enjoyable by me. That is, whether or not you enjoy it doesn't change whether it's admirable or not.
the fountain is admirable because it has certain
features, certain form, certain grace, certain splendor.
But it's enjoyable because
you have found pleasure in beholding it.
Is beauty a human need?
Oh, I think so. The pleasure, at least, the pleasure we get. A wonderful remark by Aristotle is that no man can live without pleasure. And if he's deprived of the higher pleasures, he will indulge in the lower one. Now, the pleasures that man get from enjoying beauty are higher pleasures. The aesthetic pleasures are higher than the sensual pleasures. Deprived of the aesthetic pleasures, men resort and indulge excessively in the sensual pleasures.
The medieval catalog of transcendental values includes goodness and truth, but not beauty. Why do you include beauty among the 6 great ideas?
The reason why the medieval catalog of the transcendentals included truth and goodness is because they viewed beauty as a special kind of goodness. You know Keats's remark that truth is beauty and beauty truth. I think that's not all you need to know about beauty. Truth is connected with beauty in the sense that one can make true remarks about the beautiful, but beauty is a special mode of goodness. If the good is in general the object of desire, we talked about the good as the desirable, the beautiful is the thing that's desirable to know, to apprehend. Other goods satisfy us by we acquire them and make them part of ourselves or possess them. But the beautiful is that good which we are pleased just to behold. We don't want to own it, we don't want to buy it, we don't want to use it. That's a different kind of relation to the object, but just to behold it, that pleasure is that kind of goodness that beauty is.
Give me your definition. I know I've read in your book Aristotle's definition of beautiful as Aquinas writes that the beautiful is that which pleases us upon being seen. But I'd like a layman's definition of beauty.
I have to give you 2 because I think beauty has 2 distinct aspects, and the whole problem is how those 2 aspects are related. One aspect is the subjective aspect, the aspect that comes from our experience of the object we've called beautiful. That, I think Aquinas' definition does explain. When looking at a rainbow or at a waterfall, or here at Aspen earlier this summer, they had a display of Italian fireworks, and the lawn was crowded, and there was one burst that everyone said, "Ah!" They all were stunned by the beauty of it. And the pleasure, you could feel it all around you exuding out of these people. That is what the beautiful is subjectively. That pleasure of beholding that sunburst that happened in the skies with the fireworks.
That which pleases me.
That's right. Gives you that pleasure. Now, the other definition of beauty is the objective aspect of it, which I've used the word admirable beauty for because it doesn't refer to me, it refers to the object. The object is admirable, whether I enjoy it or not, if it is intrinsically excellent. Objects are more or less excellent, have more intrinsic goodness. In a sense, this is the beauty aspect. This is another aspect of beauty which is related to goodness.
So the 2 kinds of beauties are enjoyable beauty, that which gives me pleasure upon contemplation or beholding, and admirable beauty, which is that which is beautiful whether or not I appreciate it.
Because it's in the object, it's the excellence of the object itself.
Is beauty, like art, a way of seeing?
No, I think art, the artist who creates anything, whether it be a novel or a piece of music, is a way of seeing, a way of understanding. And I think beauty is a way of receiving from the object something. I don't think you see through beauty. I think you are beholding something when you enjoy beauty.
You define see and behold differently.
Well, I don't use the word see as a visual thing. So I really substitute the word behold. You can almost use the broader word apprehend even. What you apprehend and enjoy in apprehending is beautiful. Let's take another case. Let's take two cases. Aquinas would say, of course, that of all the things that exist, God is the most beautiful. But you know, and we talk about the vision of God. But when we talk about the vision of God and enjoying the beauty of God, we aren't talking about using our eyes, obviously. So vision, visum, the Latin word visum means vision, means intuitive apprehension. Now, obviously then God, the beauty of God is not the beauty of a sensible object. Or take the beauty that we speak of when we speak of an elegant mathematical demonstration. Simple, clear, absolutely rigorous. That was the kind of beauty that Plato called intelligible beauty. And also, by the way, Shelley wrote a poem, wonderful hymn to intellectual beauty, which is again an object beyond the senses. But again, the pleasure of apprehending it, the pleasure of taking it in, is what makes it beautiful.
In this interesting account of the sixth grade ideas, there is a strange passage. At least it is to me strange.
Good.
And I'd like to read it to you because it strikes me as incongruous. The enjoyment of beauty is not confined to the lives of those who have the habits of visiting museums, attending concerts, a ballet, going to the theater, or reading poetry. It occurs also in the lives of those who are baseball, basketball, or football fans, those who watch tennis matches or go to bullfights. Now, I'm not disparaging sports. I'm a fan myself. But I don't go to a basketball game or a bullfight to enjoy beauty. I go to see who will win. I go to enjoy myself.
Now, the reason why I think this is so important, the reason why I don't want to yield to you on this point, is otherwise beauty would belong to the aesthete and the elite. I think it's an experience that should belong to all human beings. And there are lots of people who don't appreciate poetry. I would like to have all of them do so. And lots that don't appreciate the ballet or fine musical performances or read great poetry. Yet in their lives, the role of a fine sports performance gives them the same pleasure. It is not a sensual pleasure. It's a higher pleasure. It's the pleasure of aesthetic appreciation.
I recognize that, and I wasn't trying to make the point about elitism. I saw in what you were saying a distinction between beauty and enjoyment.
I can't take back that original statement by Aquinas. Beauty is that which gives us pleasure upon being beheld. The pleasure I'm talking about is the pleasure of enjoyment. When you enjoy beholding something, whether it be a triple play, a forward pass, the matador's plunge, you are experiencing beauty. Beauty is that which gives us pleasure upon being beheld.
But aren't there things that are enjoyable that are not beautiful?
Oh, sure, you can enjoy a steak, you can enjoy being massaged, you can enjoy being tickled, all kinds of sensual pleasures. And you can enjoyment is not beauty. I mean, beauty must be enjoyable, but you can enjoy lots of things that are not beautiful.
What did you mean when you wrote that the enjoyment of beauty happens to us? We do not seek it out.
That fascinates me. You can look, you can pursue truth. You can seek the good, but you have to expose yourself to beauty. I mean, it has to happen to you. The person who appreciates fine paintings can take himself to a museum. And I've had this experience walking through great museums in Europe and the United States, and you walk on and the pictures, you see the pictures, suddenly you see one.
Yeah.
It stops you. And you look at it, and you're enthralled. It has happened to you. You haven't searched it out. I would like to make 3 requests that I hope you will not find it too difficult to comply with. The first is that we begin our discussion of beauty with a consideration of the problems that idea has raised for us within the context of Western civilization and culture. I'm well aware that in other cultures, the idea of beauty has other dimensions and raises other problems. However, I think we will be better able to consider the differences after we've explored the problems beauty has raised for us in the West. My second request is that we start on the lowest level, not the highest level, not the elitist level of the most cultivated aesthete. By the lowest level, I mean the level on which ordinary men and women use the term beautiful in daily discourse. Words like truth, goodness and beauty are not strange words in the vocabulary of all of us. Everyone uses them every day, every week. That's the level at which I'd like to start. Let us begin then by examining the way in which individuals disagree about whether something is or is not beautiful, or about whether this thing is more beautiful than that. My third request is that in dealing with such disagreements, we use ordinary examples of objects about which such disagreements normally occur. In the field of nature, whether a particular flower, a particular tree, a particular horse or dog, or a particular human being is beautiful, or more beautiful than another of the same species. In the field of human products, whether they be products of fine art, or the useful arts, industrial designs, whether a particular piece of literature, a particular composition, a particular painting is beautiful, or more beautiful than another, or a particular automobile, or a particular machine. By dealing first with such simple and obvious examples of how individuals either agree or disagree in their judgments of the beautiful, we will be able to advance, I think, to more subtle and difficult problems with regard to the idea of beauty. Now then, let me ask you 3 questions. Question 1. In the sphere of beauty, do you think we should recognize the distinction between laymen and expert judges of what is beautiful? Do you think that's a valid, there's any point to that distinction between the ordinary layman who is not an expert and the expert judge? Betty Sue?
I think perhaps a better distinction could be made rather than admirable and enjoyable. A better distinction would be beauty of the perfection of form, or just, I would call it
That's
perfection
admirable.
of form. I'm not sure I'd
That's
go that
what
far.
I mean by that. I think what I mean by the word.
Versus the beauty that we experience, which isn't necessarily to do with enjoyable. And so here's what I would say about the experts there. I think a distinction should be made, but sometimes a great knowledge about perfection of form can actually prevent the experience of beauty, which is why many great works of art have precisely not been recognized by the experts until they were first recognized by other artists or by laymen who were responding to the beauty, the experience of beauty, which the work led them to.
You and I are using different, we're saying exactly the same thing. Your words
don't
are
think
exactly
we are.
that. Sorry, I'm telling you
Because
that.
I could never use a dog show for an example of beauty.
Forget the dog show.
I can't forget the dog show.
I forget
Or
the...
flowers. I can't use a flower show
Well,
either.
forget, I'm quite willing, I think I can, but you don't have to. Let's just take works of art for the
But
moment.
if you accept the dog show as an example of experts in beauty, then I think you are missing my point.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm just seeing something you are not seeing. I'll stay with your point, though. What you call the experience of beauty is what I mean by the enjoyable. What you call the apprehension of the formal structure is what I call by the admirable. Now, for the moment, the whole difference between those two, between the objective and the subjective, you've got to remember, in one case I'm talking about me, what I enjoy, my pleasure, my experience that the object gives me. The other case, I'm not talking about me at all. I'm talking only about the object. Now, whether you talk about dogs and cats and flowers and landscapes and seascapes, or whether you talk about paintings, or whether, I would go further, whether you talk about ball games and football games and basketball games and bullfights, take the whole range of objects that people enjoy and admire. See? And whether or not, in every case, an expert judgment prevails or has some point, and what the relation between that expert judgment and the ordinary judgment is, that's the open question. I'm just asking the question.
No, I'm different because the expert judgment of the perfection of form is entirely cultural bound, I think.
I bet that entirely.
So it's not, in that sense, objective.
No, I'm sorry. Perfectly obvious that the experts are culture bound. That the expert judge of a Zen garden is not the same kind of an expert judge of a Western Cartesian garden.
The difficulty I have with the whole concept is a very different one than the one we've been talking about, which is my root difficulty with the talk. I am quite willing to accept the idea that there are some objective standards of beauty in the sense that the forms created by nature, the designs, the harmony of any particular work can exist, regardless of whether or not any particular human beings happen to love it or admire it.
Yeah.
But when you put in the intervention of an expert, you see,
All right.
then I just cannot
May
go
I-
along with the concept at all.
May I please, then hold that for a moment. Well, how would you respond?
I do not accept beauty by decree, beauty by committee, beauty by experts. It is a question of the very personal judgment, taste. On the other hand, I do accept that when you come to ask for expert advice on buying something,
That's another matter entirely.
that's another matter. It, again, is a matter of taste, whether you wish to spend, because you like something, let's say $100,000 or only $25,000. But there you need the expert. Why should an expert be a better judge of taste?
Francis, please.
Maybe I should just simplify my statement by saying that I would agree with those who would say that the assessment or evaluation of beauty is very much tied in with culture. Culture, on the other hand,
Absolutely so.
is tied in with certain value judgments.
Right.
If I see a beautiful girl or a beautiful person, before I talk to them, I form my opinion, this girl is beautiful. I sit and start talking with them, and certain things about that person which are relevant to personality, character, values, and all that change my mind about that beauty. Now, I voted here with yes, meaning experts are called for, and I said yes and no. I raised my hand for yes because it came first, but in other cultures, and that's my main point, in other cultures where knowledge of the culture and of what constitutes good or bad, beautiful or ugly, is broadly shared, where expertise in knowledge are not really as clear-cut as it is in your part of the world, we do not have experts for evaluating beauty. It's a common knowledge that most people share according to the criteria that the culture has set for the values of that culture. My main difficulty is when you say that let us, for the moment, work only within the Western context. I would have thought that the significance of this constitution here is either to prove the universality of these ideas, or if there is a certain amount of difference conditioned by our different experiences, we would show what these are and whether these are plausible to be appreciated cross-culturally. Now, once you say we operate only within the Western context, I wonder whether there's any relevance if some of us who see things differently.
I assure you, Francis, only to go beyond it as soon as we can.
May I just add to Francis' viewpoint just a small point, which I think I simply mean to say that the West has need of experts because the West is so insensitive to beauty.
Alan, please.
I think Jamaica's going a bit far there.
Thank you, Alan.
That seems to me to be a bit of cultural imperialism in reverse.
I thought it was time to interject something.
But the point I'd like to make is this moment. I had a feeling, listening to the response to the first question, I was quite far away from it, that many of our views on this were influenced by the third question, and that word ought.
That's it.
Nobody likes to be told what they're to enjoy.
Right.
And if the expert is there and he says, you like that, but this is what you ought to like, everybody's going to rebel against that. Now then, but that doesn't mean we should throw away the distinction. Because if you took it a different way and you dropped that word ought for the moment, keep it out of your mind. It's never coming into my mind at all. I have the experience, I can't believe people here, anybody hasn't had the experience of listening to somebody who has studied, immersed himself in the subject, talking about something, and my eyes have expanded and I have seen. Now, I give an example. You mentioned the artist. Forget the critic. Forget the expert. I have talked with people who knew about Japanese and Chinese ceramics. And as they have talked, and they have shown me, because of their much greater knowledge and experience, they haven't said you ought to do that. They just said, look at that, now look at that, and look at that. This is what I like, they say, and I follow them. I'm not told I ought to, but I learn. Now that seems to me a much more acceptable one on that basis. Or to take another splendid example, if I go to a football match with a man who once played for my country at football, will ever learn as it is. And I think that's acceptable. He doesn't tell me you ought to like that. He says, boy, look at that.
Your expert understands objective beauty. He comes and opens your eyes.
Yeah.
He teaches you how to see things differently.
Yes.
So beauty still remains in the eyes of the beholder, except he's changed your eyes.
That's it.
And therefore the objective and subjective are not at war.
And he's done so
I'm not worried about the subjective objective. I never have.
Bob.
Well, I want to take the other side of that because as I've finally read this chapter for the third time, Mortimer's, I came to feel that the objective beauty and the admirable beauty, for me, was synonymous with what's admirable and what is technically well done, and what might be, to put it in a rather coarse vein, what a heavyweight punch might be a beautiful punch because he threw it to the right spot very hard, knocked the guy out. There may be blood all over, and certainly that's not beautiful to many people, but it is technically almost perfection, and that's what I saw as the admirable beauty.
A lot of people think that the enjoyment of beauty involves the involvement of the passions, the emotions. Not at all. It should be absolutely pure, clear of the passions. It really is an intellectual act. It's an appreciation of the goodness of the thing that gives you such pleasure.
When you say we use our mind to apprehend beauty, I recoil, because I have experienced beauty in my life without an intellectual discernment.
Again, Immanuel Kant comes to my help. Because I think when you think of using your mind, you think of using your mind analytically, discursively, cogitatively, conceptually. Two things that Kant contributes. It's wonderful that these two great figures in Western philosophy, Immanuel Kant on the one hand, and Thomas Aquinas on the other, both say two things that make the point. Not only does Kant say the pleasure you experience must be disinterested, he says the knowing must be not devoid of concept. It's non-conceptual. Though it's the mind, it's non-conceptual.
Explain that.
Intuitive.
You mean I don't have an idea of that thing?
That's right. You just take it in, intuitively, apprehend it without any analysis, without any conceptual framework. And that means one thing further. The beautiful thing that you see or behold, whatever it is, a piece of music, a dance, a sports performance, mathematical demonstration, you take as that one individual thing. In almost all of your other perceptions, you see things as members of classes. You see a cow as one of a class of cows. You see trees as, but when the tree becomes beautiful for you, you see that individual tree, not as a specimen of tree, but just that one tree. You aren't thinking about it, you aren't using your concepts, you're just apprehending it as that one individual thing.
I don't experience the tree, but I can experience a poem, I can experience a great piece of prose, I can experience a painting.
That's right.
So there are different kinds of beauty.
Oh, sure.
Different degrees of beauty.
Well, and different kinds of objects of beauty.
So are you saying, and would you assent to the statement that beauty is in the eye of the beholder?
I would say yes, but not entirely there. It must be, using the word eye metaphorically, because it needn't be the eye, the physical eye.
Yes.
Beauty is in the apprehension of the beholder, put it that way. It must be there, but it must also be in the object that causes the apprehension to be pleasant. In other words, not all objects give you that pleasure, and I personally think that there are two hierarchies. There's a hierarchy of beauty in things themselves. Some things are less beautiful, some things are more beautiful. And the person with more cultivated taste is the person who gets more pleasure from the better object. The person with less cultivated taste, in gradations, gets more pleasure from the less perfect object. There are versifiers who write not great poetry, but many people enjoy them because they haven't come to appreciate Keats and Shelley or Wordsworth or Donne, and they get the same pleasure. You see, we mustn't look down on them. They are enjoying beauty, though beauty for them is at a lower level. The object that they get the pleasure from in reading it or beholding it is in itself a less admirable object. So I'm saying there's a hierarchy of admirable excellence and a hierarchy of enjoyable beauty going together.
What creates the hierarchy of admirable beauty? What determines that this is more beautiful than that?
Can I answer the question first in terms of works of art? Here I think that the expert judgment is necessary. Certainly T.S. Eliot is, I would admit at once, is a better judge of the excellence of different pieces of poetry than I am. I would read T.S. Eliot's Essays in Criticism in order to stand by as he makes his appreciation of Dante's Divine Comedy or of Donne's poetry clear to me, you see.
Of its form,
That's
of
right.
its structure
That's right.
as a work
That's
of
right.
art.
And so that I think here, when you're talking about the hierarchy of degrees of admirable excellence in the object themselves, you need the guidance, the tutelage of the expert critic, the expert appreciator.
If I accept that and were to hear an expert say, Dante is a better poet in his form than James Dickey, I'm still able to say I enjoy Dickey more than I enjoy Dante.
I certainly can say that. And that raises one of the great problems, you see. There are two positions here, and I really don't know which is right. Should I say to you, but Bill, if Dante is, by the judgment of the expert, a better poet, his poems are greater poems than those written by John Dickey, shouldn't you enjoy them more? No.
Can you say to anybody you ought to enjoy something
No,
more?
I think you can't say at this point in life, you ought to enjoy Dante more than Dickey. I think I could say you ought to do something about cultivating your taste so that sometime later you'll enjoy Dante more than Dickey.
Which is the next question.
Next question is, do you agree with the
Next
layman?
question for me.
Do you agree with the next question is, second question was, do you agree with, but I'm going to take your yeses and nos, do you agree with the layman who at that dinner party said no, no, no to the experts who said what they ought to enjoy? They said, no, beauty is entirely in the eye of the beholder, no oughts to it at all. That's the second question. Where do you stand on that, Ruth?
Well, I think if you're talking about enjoyable beauty, yes, it is in the eyes of the beholder. That is to say, subjective beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that from that standpoint, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. But that's not to suggest that we are not all influenced by people who know more about particular subjects than we do. As an educator, we try to help children have a greater appreciation of literature, music, art, because hopefully we know more than they do. And so our tastes are influenced by people who know more than we do. I don't know if we would call them all experts, however.
Well, just know, anyone who knows more is a little more expert than who knows less. Just a little more.
Sometimes an expert is somebody who's just away from home.
Oh, well. you're thinking of a consultant.
Mortimer, I have serious problems with I've said no, I've registered no for the first question. Simply because I answered yes or no at the level of a game, an intellectual game we are playing. I think the problem is much more important, and the questions do not bring out the importance of beauty and the range of beauty. We have been talking about artifacts, we are talking about certain aspects of nature, but beauty is not limited to that. Beauty is to be found in human relationships. Beauty is to be found in the personality of a person. Beauty is to be found in the laws of nature underlying its various manifestations and diversities. There is that kind of beauty that is, by definition, almost excluded by your questions.
Remember now that I asked the question about experts within a very limited scope of examples, about persons talking about novels they read. I didn't mean that was the only discussion. You do me an injustice to suppose that I think that's the only discussion of beauty. Obviously, beauty of character, beauty of a mathematical demonstration, beauty of all kinds of natural objects. But sometimes you have to focus on one set of problems first before you go to others. In this group, we want to talk about all of them at once, I think.
That's right. That's exactly right.
At least we had a good discussion.
Oh, marvelous. That's terrific. I was going to stick with the rule and say, all right, let's discuss it from a Western perspective. Right.
I said, oh, he's getting ready to.
But I think at one point or another, it really ought to be possible to paint that total picture. So that, you see, what I fear is that when cultures are so foreign to one another, or when people are foreign to each other's cultures, it's not easy for the logic to convey itself and be convincing. Sometimes I feel that when we talk on this side of the table, you know, it's almost as though there might be a wall of communication, not with you people there, but I can see that, you know, you're having two different logics coming together, and we need for those logics to actually communicate to one another. I don't think it's as easy. Sometimes I feel that when we talk to Mortimer, you know, as we talk about something so different, which you would dismiss to be the world of myth and you know, theology and all that, I can literally see his eyes and minds closed. It's almost irrelevant. You see?
Well, it's a relevant
It doesn't-
present conversation that he wants to direct.
That's right. I
program.
think
it's not to his intellectual.
Right, but he's only a symbol of something bigger.
No, I think
a bigger problem.
I think it's
in
really
terms of how
doing-
you communicate a different message to someone who has been used always to thinking differently. Just
Isn't there such a
those
problem
people
with
who are
the
not used
structure
to
of this
seeing.
whole seminar that we are asked or invited to discuss on the basis of his theses in his book and his admitted limitation to Western thoughts and Western conceptions.
Well,
and now we bring in our friends from the third world, and they find themselves to either be discussing their bit or our bit, but there's no fusion between the two.
That's my hope and my
It does
motivation.
emerge, even though he does, Mortimer does on occasion want to rather rigidly talk about one thing without its relation to the other. He's not denying the relationship. He simply wants to be sure we're clear about the first thing we're talking about.
Yes, actually, no, I would.
And since these thoughts are not that clear to us, much less to anybody else, he wants a certain precision. Now, we achieve that to some extent. Other times we fail miserably. But we start with it.
What do you think about the common saying, de gustibus non disputandum? There's no disputing matters of taste. Is that right or wrong?
Yes, there is a dispute possible about taste, but who is to define taste? Who's to say which taste is superior and which is inferior? Am I the judge? Is someone else the judge? Do I have to call an expert in to find out what taste is, what is superior or inferior? I may consider my own taste of a dress or a painting to be superior to others, and yet others may think, well, this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. He has bad taste. Who am I, or who are we to decide what is inferior and what is superior? I think we lack a measuring stick.
Ruth?
Ruth? I believe that taste can be influenced, obviously, by exposure, by knowledge, by an expansion of one's information base. And I think it's critical for the adult world to know that that's their responsibility to children, to help them ultimately develop a broader appreciation and an ultimately more understanding, more enjoyment of the different forms of art. So what I'm saying is we can't just limit it to one form of art, one form of expression, one form of beauty, as it were. I really believe we tend to categorize too much. If you're a good musician, you can't be a good painter. If you're a good writer, you can't be a good musician. And I really believe we ought to expose and help to cultivate. It's really our responsibility.
Alan.
Let me just say the one word in answer to your questions. We all have this difficulty because we're embarrassed by suggesting that there are people who have worse taste than we have. Let me then happily suggest that I know people who have better taste than I have.
True.
And that gets round the difficulty. And let me say why I know that as a certain fact. Because I know people who, when I was younger, appreciated things which I did not at that time appreciate. And later, partly as a result of listening to them and watching them, I came to appreciate what they had appreciated. Therefore, I elevated my taste to catch up with theirs.
Can I
So
ask
it
a
seems
question
to me-
at once? Because that fascinates me. If you say that, Alan, are you also saying that out there among the objects you appreciate, when your taste improves, you're appreciating something which is objectively better?
Yes.
Good.
At least I am. I am overjoyed.
I think it's, in one way, the liberation to love beauty is accompanied by not teaching taste. I think there's a real danger in teaching taste as opposed to liberating the mind to see. Shakespeare says, let every eye negotiate for itself and trust no agent. The most difficulty I have in teaching poetry is that the students want me to tell them what is beautiful so that they can go out and say, see, I know T.S. Eliot is more beautiful than something else that we read in grade school. And what I have to struggle with again and again is to break down the taste that they have acquired and the taste that they think they should acquire in order to liberate their eyes to look, to frame in order to love if that's necessary, and then to become one with the object, and that perhaps cannot be explained in my one sentence here, and in that union to have the experience of beauty, which is apart from anything we might call beautiful in itself, which might be a matter of taste.
Can I come back?
Do you think that there are universal qualities in, say, the beauty of a prize-winning rose, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, that triple play in the last inning of the baseball game you were talking about, Michelangelo's Pieta, a Zen garden in Tokyo, Milton's prose, and that display of fireworks you saw on the 4th of July in Aspen? Are there universal qualities in those?
That's the most stumbling and stupefying question you can address me. What's common to all of them is the pleasure we have in apprehending them. But if you put to me, what in all these diverse objects is common, what are the common traits? The most I can say is not very good. I can quote Aquinas again, is 3 Latin words, integritas, proportio, and claritas. Which means those objects have extraordinary unity. Their parts are harmoniously welded into a whole. The whole is well proportioned in the parts, and the form of the whole is clear. The form is one way of saying it, the form is effulgent. It flows out to you. Whether or not you can see those 3 properties, integrity, clarity, and proportion, in all those diverse objects, I don't know. I don't think anyone has been able to answer it. I think it's a wonderful question you've asked. I think it's a question everyone should consider and ponder about, but I know of no one who can answer it. I've never found the answer.
It makes me think of something in your book where you write, quote, mankind can make progress in the pursuit of truth. Mankind can also make progress in the sphere of goodness, but there is no possibility of progress in the sphere of beauty.
Let me explain it. That's, I think, a true statement, and not too hard to explain. Let's take architecture. Let me think of 5 or 6 classical forms: the Egyptian temple, the Greek temple, the Romanesque temple, the Byzantine mosque, and the Gothic cathedral. Now, you can compare one Gothic cathedral with another. I think Ely and Durham, for example, in England, and Chartres in France, are more magnificent than other Gothic cathedrals. That's a judgment, but I think many people agree with that. There are temples, there are some Greek temples that are better than others, but you can't say this Greek temple is more beautiful than that Egyptian temple or than that Byzantine mosque. You can't compare, for example, the cathedral at Ely or the cathedral at Chartres with the mosque at St. Sophia or the Blue Mosque in Istanbul.
But you can't say that Jefferson's memorial is more beautiful than the memorial to Wellington in London.
No.
Why?
If they're both, maybe I shouldn't have said no so quickly. If the 2 specimens are specimens of the same genre, I say you can say that one Greek temple is more beautiful than another, that one Gothic cathedral is more beautiful than another. You can't say that a Gothic cathedral is more beautiful than a Greek temple.
Then I should have said you can't say that Jefferson's memorial is more beautiful than Pharaoh's tomb.
No, you can't.
Because
they are a different genre of architecture.
And you can only judge their beauty
the genre
admirably by the form which they are striving to perfect.
Well, for example, let's take a Zen garden for a moment, and what we call a Western Cartesian garden, which is that at Versailles or at the palaces in England. They're different genre of garden, totally different kinds. One Zen garden may be more beautiful than another, but you can't say that a Zen garden is more or less beautiful than a Cartesian garden in the West. That's why, and the reason why I took the architects, because you have the Greek temple. I mean, the Egyptian temples come first, the Greek temple second, the Romanesque third, the Byzantine mosque fourth, time. And is that a progress? It's going from one genre to another, and within those genres, there are better and worse buildings. But one type of building is not more beautiful than another.
But in a given society or culture, if it's not possible to progress with beauty, is it possible to regress? Can you lose the sense?
You can. You would not regress. That it's possible for a society to lose its taste for beauty, lose its interest in beauty, to be so immersed in daily affairs and practical matters, in material things, as not to enjoy beauty. And one of the usual criticisms of America is that Americans are material. They aren't aesthetically cultivated. I think this is untrue, by the way, but this is something that's said about people, that they're aesthetically uncultivated.
If we've lost that taste, should we seek to regain it?
I think so, because I think the enjoyment of beauty is an indispensable part of a good human life. I think it plays an important. You see, I think in the book I have a chapter on the the beauty of truth and the goodness of beauty. Now, the goodness of beauty is the role it plays in human life.
It is good because we need it.
We need it. We need it because we need that kind of pleasure.
Why do we need that kind of pleasure?
Because we need I think we need the experience of what I'm going to call ecstasy. No, I don't mean to be mystical about that. Ecstasy is being taken out of yourself, taken out of the turmoils and the trammels of practical life. Beauty lifts us up for a moment. And I've often felt that the experience of beauty on earth is the low terrestrial analog of the vision of God in heaven, which is supposedly, the beatific vision, is the most perfect enjoyment of all. I'll never forget, I was teaching a great books class many years ago with Bob Hutchins. We were reading Dante's Divine Comedy. We finally got to the Paradiso, and when we explained we discussed the Paradiso, that in heaven, the souls of the saved were there in perfect enjoyment, enjoying God, the vision of God. And a wonderful Chicago lawyer that I was very fond of said, "Oh, Bob Hutchins, is that all they're doing, just looking at God?" "Yes," said Bob. "That's un-American," he said.
Let me answer.
Please.
Beauty may well be the essential condition for the survival of human civilization in the years to come. As pressures, population pressures on resources develop, as competition for scarce resources develop, as we develop a much stronger sense of limits to human life and to social life, fear becomes more and more an element that may dominate our lives unless we are capable of developing within ourselves qualities that we have considered to be marginal on the whole to our lives so far. In the world in which we are going to live, personal space is bound to be reduced. And unless we develop a sense of inner space through either the contemplation and the enjoyment or the creation of beauty by ourselves or through the religious experience, the people and civilizations are bound to behave in a more violent manner that brings out this darker side of the human being and of civilizations. And no civilization is free of that. That is why I say that our capacity to manage our fears, to stay on top of our fears in a very crowded, competitive, and hungry world may well depend on our capacity not to deal with art and with beauty as things that we enjoy from the outside and judge by, but as essential ingredients of our growth as a human being.
Bob?
I'm listening to Mark and Coco, Francis, from other cultures, particularly their point about all of you speak about the holistic approach, which I think we in the Western industrialized nations generally lack. We have a civilization that is based, at least in broad context, on work ethic. It's based on experts in different fields. It's based on specialists. And we have almost come to view beauty as a luxury, I think. And I think this is part of our problem. I think perhaps if we can get, as Ruth has suggested, the school children back into, and even using Mortimer's word of ought to be taught, be about beauty. Certainly they can't be taught beauty, but their minds can be open to the possibilities of beauty. I think it not only is an important step because beauty makes a much more whole person, but it's an important step for this nation and perhaps for the whole Western world, because it's hard to be full of anger if you appreciate beauty.
Alan?
I think that I reserve the word beauty not just for all the things I enjoy, but for a particular form of enjoyment, both art and nature, when applied to human appearance, human behavior, creative arts, the performing arts, your mathematical proof, your scientific explanation, or even an original and arresting argument. And I think what that quality is this. It's related to the notion of harmony. And the words which I find coming out are congruence, proportion, balance, symmetry, grace, ease, elegance, economy, simplicity.
May I say, St. Thomas,
yeah,
who said, on the one hand, beauty is that which pleases upon being seen or being beheld,
yes,
also said, your point, there are three, I'm going to use the Latin words, the three elements in the objective beauty, the admirable object, are integritas, proportio, and claritas.
Yes. It produces the inner resource. It creates and refreshes that inner resource. So I would like to see us make this point about beauty and other forms of enjoyment. I mean, take Henry Moore, my friend, or take Picasso. I enjoy their art. I'm not sure that I always think it's beautiful, but I may still enjoy it because it opens all sorts of gates to me. It makes me see things differently. I don't think I actually enjoy King Lear. I enjoy King Lear. I don't know that I think it's beautiful. I don't think the word's very appropriate. I enjoy it. It's great tragedy.
Would you, I have to ask you, do you think then that Aquinas is wrong when he says, on the subjective side, the beautiful is that which gives us pleasure when we behold it? That's what I mean by enjoyment. I don't mean by enjoyment is getting pleasure from it.
It's a special kind of enjoyment, I feel. I feel enjoyment is wider, for me at any rate. A last point of all, and then I will finish. I think we mustn't neglect the importance of fashion. Now, fashion is often treated as if it was superficial. I believe it's one of the deepest mysteries of social life. I can give an example which I have seen with my own eyes. Suddenly, in the Tate Gallery with which I was connected on it, we have had our cellars filled with 19th century art. Nobody wanted it. And suddenly, everybody wants to see 19th century art, and we have had to take away the abstract and push them aside, and we have had to fill our galleries again with 19th century art. And that's because young people suddenly wanted to see that and felt for it. And the reproductions they buy are of 19th century art. Now, the fascinating thing is that suddenly I find I can see 19th century art in my eye. And that is a mystery which I don't understand, but which seems to me one of the marvels. And may I say, Mortimer, one of the things about beauty that makes me very, very unhappy is discussing it. Because somehow or other I feel it's getting grubby at the edges. What I want to do is go and enjoy it.
What gives you pleasure today that you would call admirably beautiful?
I think I enjoy the beauty of literature. My own experience, my own cultivation of taste is greater in the field of literature than in poetry and prose than it is in music or in painting. But there's a museum in Paris, the one that's near the Tuileries Gardens, that has all the great modern painters, the Monet and the Monet. And I can spend hours just walking. There's hardly a painting there that I can't stand in front of for many, many minutes, just enthralled by it.
Most of them, I was there not long ago, most of them have that proportion, clarity, harmony.
The Monets and the Manets are simply marvelous.
But you wouldn't proceed from there, would you, to say that everyone else should stand and appreciate those and receive pleasure from them?
I can't say ought, though I do think, and if my judgment in this case is right, that they are magnificent paintings in themselves. I would like to hope that more persons could have their tastes cultivated so they could get the enjoyment from them. I think in this respect, I would say about beauty exactly what I say about truth and goodness. I think everyone's mind should be trained so that it has, shall I say, the excellence of logical reason. I mean, one should have one's mind cultivated to operate rationally. I think everyone's moral character should be cultivated, should be cultivated so that one has the moral virtues. I think there's an ought there. One should cultivate the moral virtues. One should cultivate a logical mind. Why can't I say one should cultivate one's aesthetic taste? Why isn't the same ought or should apply to beauty as to truth and goodness?
Well, you have my permission to say it. Nonetheless, I may be so constituted as to enjoy what I consider beautiful, which you do not consider beautiful. It must still remain true, and I think it is in your book that it remains true, that beauty is finally in the eye of the beholder, even though you have acknowledged that there are universal qualities of properties which make an object beautiful.
But suppose I discover, as someone could discover in my case, for example, when I was a very young man, I thought the greatest piece of music was Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony. You know, well, after you hear it, after I grew up and heard it more and more, then began to hear the music of Beethoven, the music of Mozart, the music of Bartok, I realized that my childish enthusiasm about the Tchaikovsky Sixth waned, and I found that I could appreciate more complicated and I think better pieces of music. Now, isn't that a progress on my part? Haven't I improved? Haven't I learned to enjoy Bartok, for example? And isn't my learning to enjoy Bartok an advance in my aesthetic appreciation?
I would say yes, and I think it would also be natural humanly for someone to say, I'd like to share this with other people.
That's
I want
right.
to share my appreciation without, however, saying that a person of, quote, inferior taste, quote, is a person who doesn't enjoy beauty.
Oh, no, I agree with you completely. Anyone at any level of taste who gets pleasure from the object because it holds them in such a way that it gives them that pleasure is enjoying beauty. The only thing I'm saying is the person of inferior taste is getting that pleasure from an inferior object. In the world, there are superior objects who would give him a higher range of pleasure. If we lifted him up, if we lifted his taste up, he would cease to enjoy. He might cease to enjoy those inferior objects, but in their place, he would be enjoying superior objects.
But I've seen people who are experts, critics, who write about a piece of art, a film, a movie, who don't enjoy it while they're seeing it, even though they acknowledge that it's excellent.
I think the reason for that is, I really think the critical attention is analytical and discursive. And the person who goes to a film to criticize it, or goes to the music critic who goes to a concert to write a critique of it, is not doing what Immanuel Kant says you should do, apprehending devoid of concept. He's apprehending with all kinds of intellectual judgments. At that, he may enjoy the concert, the piece of music, at some other time where he doesn't have to write a critique the next morning. But if he's at the concert, looking at his watch to see if he can get back to the office to type the critique for the morning paper, he hasn't enjoyed the music at all.
In other words, one should not pursue beauty so much as one should be open to it.
That's it. That's precisely the point.
Mortimer Adler. In our next episode, the idea is goodness. I'm Bill Moyers.
For a transcript of this program, send $3 to Ideas, Post Office Box 900, New York, New York, 10101. This program was made possible by Atlantic Richfield Company, Energy, Chemicals, Minerals.